Lights, camera, action.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast.
Hey guys.
Today we are going to be discussing Captain America, the First Avenger. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So Captain America was released on July 19th of 2011. It was directed by Joe Johnston. It's starring Chris Evans, Haley Atwell, Sebastian Stan, Hugo Weaving, and Stanley Tucci. The distributor is Paramount Pictures. It had a runtime of 2 hours and 4 minutes. It's rated PG-13, and its budget was $140 million, but the box office total was $370.6 million.
Wow. Yeah, I remember this movie. I don't know. It wasn't considered a flop, but it just didn't do that well commercially. But it's okay, because in the long run, the sequel, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and the third one, Captain America: Civil War, are some of the best Marvel movies to date. So Captain America ended up beating out Hulk and Thor, or Iron Man and Thor, as far as the best trilogy. But I think this first one is really, really solid too. But anyways.
Yeah, I agree. I'm kind of surprised that it didn't do that well because, I don't know, maybe I'm just opinionated, but I love like historical movies like this. But I mean, it's history and action. So,
well, I think that might have been part of why it didn't do as great, just because it was a period piece. You know, this was set during World War II, but it wasn't like a World War II movie. It was, but it wasn't as a comic book World War II movie, which was kind of a hard sell for some people. I know Kevin Feige actually said the hardest thing about doing this movie was that the Captain America First Avenger was going to be a period piece. And like a lot of producers, like higher ups, did not like that decision. And originally they were planning to have at least 1/3 of the movie take place in the modern day, just to kind of fight against that. But I'm glad that the whole movie takes place in the 40s during World War II. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I really like it as a whole.
Yeah.
All right, well, I will just jump into some fun facts. So first I have like an Easter egg. So the Easter egg is that the first Captain America comic book can actually be seen in the movie. So Cap's sidekick, Bucky Barnes, was actually featured on the cover of that original comic.
Yep.
But they ended up, for the movie, they kind of photoshopped him off of it.
Okay.
Because in the comics, Bucky was like a teenager, but in the movie, he was like a year older than Steve.
Yep.
But I thought that was cool that they included that in there.
Where can it be seen at? Do you know?
I believe it's at like a booth on the side of the road. You know how like they'll have like those magazine booths and stuff?
Actually, you're right. I remember that. I think they show a scene where one of the soldiers is reading the Captain America comic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
So my next one is that the body double that plays Steve at the beginning, you know, he's like, at the beginning of the movie, he's a lot scrawnier before he has the experiment done on him and everything.
Yes.
He also appears as a character in the movie. He plays a bartender. So I have always
that's cool.
been interested to know what he actually looks like, and I didn't even realize he gets a little cameo.
Yeah, and a lot of my production details, I focus on how they visually made that happen.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I'm excited to talk about that.
So my next one is that Sebastian Stan, who plays Bucky, actually auditioned to play Steve. Now, looking back, he says that he thinks Bucky suits him better just as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
But another person who was considered for the role of Steve was John Krasinski.
Yes.
And Emily Blunt, his wife, was considered to play Peggy Carter. She just didn't end up doing it, I believe, because of some schedule conflicts. But Emily Blunt was also, this is kind of off topic, but she was considered to play Black Widow also down the road.
Yeah, so she actually was originally going to be Black Widow. Like, she accepted the role and everything for Iron Man 2.
Okay, maybe that's the scheduling conflict one. I can't
Yes,
remember.
that's what I was going to say. So the scheduling conflict came in Iron Man 2. She was doing another movie at the time. I don't remember what it was, but she ended up having to drop out of Iron Man 2 because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, my next one is that Chris Evans actually turned down this role for Cap 3 times.
Yes.
He was already very familiar with movies based on comics. I mean, he had played the Human Torch in X-Men movies.
No,
Or
what?
not, sorry, did I get that wrong?
Yeah, Human
Or
Torch.
Fantastic Four. Sorry, I don't know why I was thinking.
That's okay.
I have something about X-Men and another fact. That's probably why I mixed it up.
Yeah.
Fantastic Four movies. And I'm not familiar with the superhero. I don't know if you would be, John, but he plays Lucas Lee in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Have you watched that?
I know what it is. It's a movie. It is a comic book, but no, I've not watched it. I don't really care to watch it, but yes.
Okay. Yeah. So he wasn't like unfamiliar with superhero movies or comic book movies or anything.
Yes.
But so it wasn't because of that, but it was because he was kind of like worried about the potential of extreme stardom, whether the movie was a huge success or a huge failure, either way. So my last one is that there were 2 other Marvel characters, and this is where my X-Men fact comes in.
Okay.
Wolverine and Magneto were around during the time of World War II, just timeline-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was talk of including them in the movie, like just like small cameos because of that.
Yeah.
But since Fox owned the rights to X-Men at the time,
Yep.
they couldn't. But that would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, I know there was actually legitimate talk of Hugh Jackman making a little cameo as Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to because he really wanted to be able to fight the Hulk in the MCU. Because in the comics, that's originally what the Weapon X program that created Wolverine was made for. It was to hunt down and kill the Hulk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but because 20th Century Fox didn't own the rights to the Hulk, Universal had the rights. They were never able to do anything with that. So, yeah.
Well, that is all my facts that I had.
Okay. All right. So my turn to jump into production details.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Give me 1 second to pull up my notes here. All right. So Captain America, the First Avenger. So before I even get started, just know that very similarly to when we did our first episode, Iron Man, there was like loads and loads and loads of information on this, probably because everybody's a fan of Marvel now and it's such a massive success.
Right.
But I really kind of had to sift through. So there's like some really rich details out there if you want to learn about it, but we're working hard to kind of keep these condensed and not be rambling on forever and ever. So I picked out some stuff that we normally talk about, like principal photography, shooting locations, stuff like that. But one of the big things that I focus on is how they visually created the pre-super soldier serum Steve Rogers. So without further ado, so similar to Iron Man 2008, a Captain America film had been slated to happen many times from many different directors and studios prior to it actually happening under the Marvel Studios name. So most notably, a Captain America film was going to be licensed out to Warner Brothers, which was a big deal because Warner Brothers never had a license to do anything with Marvel. They actually own the rights to DC Comics as a whole. Warner Brothers owns DC. So the only studios that Marvel had dealt with was Sony, Universal, and 20th Century Fox. So this was going to be a really big one, and it was slated to happen around 2005, I believe. Or maybe it was closer to 2003. But if you remember, right around that time period is when Marvel started consulting David Maisel to kind of be the architect for the first 3 phases of the MCU. Or maybe it was just the first phase. I don't remember. But he's the one who came up with the idea for an interconnected universe by Marvel themselves, not licensing it out to anybody else. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go listen to episode 1 of Married to Movies, where we talk about that quite a bit in our Iron Man episode. So if you remember, if you already listened to our Iron Man episode, there were many directors considered to do Captain America once Marvel decided that they were going to be doing it themselves. And most notably, Jon Favreau was thrown around to direct this film. And actually, I thought that Marvel had asked him to do it, but he actually requested to do Captain America.
I think I did read about that, yeah.
Yeah, he just really loved the character, thought it would be cool to do a period piece like that. But after they kind of started talking, he ended up choosing Iron Man instead. So that was Jon's choice. But he was, for a time, going to be the director for Captain America.
It makes me curious to know, like, what differences there would be if he had directed it.
Yeah, I agree. Overall, though, I think I'm happy with the outcome because Iron Man 1 is one of the greatest movies ever, in my opinion. I mean, it's in the Library of Congress, so that's a big deal.
Oh, really?
That's
cool.
It is. That actually happened just recently. But it's also just John nailed that, and I think Joe Johnston really nailed Captain America.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy with how it turned out. But principal photography began on June 28th, 2010, and they first started shooting in London, which I thought was interesting, but it makes perfect sense because they were shooting there because London is still like very well preserved. It's not been modernized.
It's a historic
Exactly.
area.
Yeah, so that made it really easy to kind of capture that 1940s aesthetic that they were going for. So filming originally wrapped in November 2010, but reshoots were done in March and April of 2011. So they redid some shots, and they shot on location in the United Kingdom, various locations, Los Angeles and Times Square, New York City, which is the after credits scene where where Steve has come out of the ice, and then
and
Nick
he's
Fury
in modern day. And
yes, yep. So they did that shot on location and everything, which I thought was cool. There wasn't a whole lot of well, I'll talk about it here in a second. There was, but not for the reason you'd think. But there wasn't a whole lot of green screen like shooting being done. They shot in camera on location, which most modern movies are just on a soundstage and behind a green screen now.
Right.
But anywho, so on to the main event of what I'm going to be talking about. This is actually the only thing I'm going to be talking about for the rest of my production details section. So like I said, if there's more you want to learn about Captain America, the First Avenger, there is no shortage of information. Just Google it. You could read for at least 40 minutes. I picked this because I thought it was the most interesting. So I mentioned this before, but obviously in the movie, you have Steve Rogers, who by birth is just this really scrawny, unhealthy, unfit guy, so to speak. You know, he has asthma. He doesn't have muscles. He's, a foot shorter than everybody else, 2 feet maybe. I mean, just a real tiny guy. So I'm going to refer to him as Skinny Steve from here on out because pre-Super Soldier Serum Steve Rogers is kind of a mouthful.
I like it.
Yeah. But, okay. So in order to make Skinny Steve happen, what they did was they would shoot a scene with Chris Evans in the scene among other actors, just like it was a normal scene, that there was nothing different. Then they would reshoot that scene, but they wouldn't have Chris in it. So they'd have everybody act out their parts, but Chris would not be in the shot. Then they would shoot the scene for a third time, but they would have a body double in place of Steve, who was a skinny guy. And that's the guy who you mentioned. You said he's a bartender later in the movie?
Right, yep.
Okay, yeah. So he would be in the third shot where he was kind of taking the place of Chris. And then finally, they would reshoot the entire scene and they would recreate the set on a green screen and have Chris act out the scene, but they would have him act it out alone. So nobody else would be there except for Chris, and he'd be acting it out by himself. And the reason that they did this was so that after they digitally morphed Steve's head onto the skinny body double, having that green screen backing made it a lot easier for them to kind of cut and paste him back into the original shot that they did with Chris. So that's how they did that. For every scene that Skinny Steve is in, they had to shoot it 4 times.
That's insane.
Yeah. Pretty extensive.
Very tedious, but
yeah,
props to the actors who had to do that over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people who had to do all the editing too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a company that did the visual effects that they were hired specifically just for Skinny Steve because it was really a pretty big task. I don't remember their name. I probably should have wrote them down, but they're based out of LA and they specialize in quote unquote digital plastic surgery. So they did all the work and I got to say, it looks fantastic. I mean,
very believable.
Yeah, 100%. It really is something where like I went back and watched behind the scenes footage of the first take where it's Chris amongst the other actors. And it's so weird because Chris is a big guy, honestly. I mean, he's not huge, not like Chris Hemsworth big, but he's still big. I mean, he's tall and he did, get ripped for the Captain America role. So seeing him like in the scene where he's sitting across from Dr. Erskine, played by Stanley Tucci, the night before the procedure, and they're sitting on the bed, I rewatched that. And with full-sized Chris Evans, it is so weird. But anyways, last bit of info I have on this. So if you remember, I said that when they did the first take that Chris was shot in camera amongst the other actors, and it was, obviously him, like his full body size. Whenever they would do that, they had to carefully create the set so that Chris would be sitting lower or standing lower than the actors around him so that it would look like he's shorter. So they would create, kind of like cutouts in the stage and whatnot if he was standing in one spot. But what they also had to do a lot of the time was have actors stand on like fruit boxes in front of Chris so that they were like a foot or two taller. But beyond that, what they had to do was the production team would find Chris if they were shooting a scene with him where he was going to be Skinny Steve, and they would put a little mark on his chin so that the other actors knew that they needed to be looking down to be in his eyesight rather than at his actual eye line.
It's funny.
Yeah. And then vice versa for Chris, the production team would put a mark on the foreheads of the people he was acting with so that he remembered to look up because he would be shorter in that scene. So yeah, that's all I got. But I think it's a cool little funny detail that, I mean, it's not something you think about, but it makes perfect sense that they would do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing kind of going off of that, this was after Steve received the serum and everything. But in real life, Bucky or Sebastian Stan is about the same height as Chris Evans.
Yeah.
But they had to, after Cap receives the serum and everything, he's supposed to be like larger than life, like towering over everybody.
Yes.
So they had to be really creative with camera angles when Sebastian was standing next to Chris because Steve was supposed to be a little taller than Bucky at this point.
Right. Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for production details. So I will ask you, how would you rate this movie on a scale of 1 to 100?
Man, I'm trying to remember what I rated Iron Man. I should have looked back.
Yeah.
Because
we need to make a running list for each movie, how we've rated it.
Right.
I can do that.
Okay. Man, I want to say maybe 91. Yeah. Maybe.
Okay. I think I can get behind that because I was probably going to rate it right around that same area. It's a good movie. It's not blow my mind. The Winter Soldier might be the best standalone superhero movie. Mm-hmm. At the very least, best MCU standalone superhero movie. It's just such a solid movie. So I definitely can't rate it as high as I'd rate that. And Civil War is really good too. I really like that, but I don't think it's as good as The Winter Soldier. It's close.
Yeah.
But The Winter Soldier is just so solid.
Maybe I should even knock my score down a little bit because now I'm thinking of it in terms of any Marvel movie. And I don't know that it would compare to some of my top favorite Marvel movies.
So if it were me, I would probably rate it. I'm going to give it a 91 also.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know that I'll give it any higher because it's a really solid movie. But for the reason that you've already said, there are some really, really good MCU movies out there. Mm-hmm. But Captain America, the First Avenger, is better than a lot of MCU movies too.
It really is, yeah.
And I don't know, there's something special about doing a period piece. Like when I watch this back, it doesn't feel like an MCU movie in the sense that there's a part of me that gets kind of annoyed with the Marvel method and where they're at now. The movies are kind of, I wouldn't say predictable, but cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're following a basic outline of what it should be, and the films have also started to kind of look generic. Like having that 1940s aesthetic really makes it kind of stand out. Like
Right.
Guardians is obviously an exception to that because it's in outer space and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like how real this one feels. It doesn't feel like it's in this huge overarching universe that's this major cash cow for Disney.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just feels like a good period piece.
Mm-hmm.
So that I really do enjoy that, and I feel like that really works in its favor, going against some of the other ones.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
yeah, okay, cool. So what are some of your likes or dislikes?
This is going to be tough because it's been a while since I've seen this movie. We didn't watch this movie right before recording like we usually do.
We
so
usually
I'm gonna
watch
try to
it so
just
that we're
pick from my memory.
yeah.
I mean, I love just Bucky and Steve, like their relationship, their friendship. Like,
Yeah.
I love that. And I mean, for those of you who don't know, like Jon and I we love the friendship, and it's kind of like been like this ongoing thing in Jon and I's relationship. Just, like the line, "I'm with you till the end of the line." I don't know if that's said in this movie. I don't think it is. Is it?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like I like painted like a Bucky and Cap painting, and like, I just love their dynamic and like how Bucky would stand up for Steve even when he was skinny Steve, and just how it carries through the whole MCU even after the Winter Soldier and everything.
Yeah. Well, just the sincere friendships that's there, that it is.
Right.
Cap lost his mom and dad, which you
Mhm.
find that out in later movies, but that Bucky was there for him through
Right.
all of that, and that Bucky was really all Steve had after his mom and dad died. And from there, Bucky stood by him despite like, him being a tiny guy that gets picked on and whatnot. And he even tried to, get dates for him and everything, get girls.
Right.
And Steve stood by Bucky. He didn't give up on him once Bucky was captured by Hydra, and he actually went behind enemy lines against orders from the general and went and saved his life.
Right.
So yeah, I agree. I think that dynamic and relationship is a really strong through line, and it's really cool to see friendship played out that way.
Right.
It almost reminds me a little bit of the biblical history of David and Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
Just that, like Jonathan's father was trying to kill David.
Right.
And, Jonathan helped him, protected him, and even eventually ended up giving up the throne for David. Just like, I don't think you see a lot of that stuff played out as often, like sincere friendship on the screen today.
Right. Yeah.
And, there's usually like ulterior motives at work. But anyways, I really do like seeing their friendship. And I also really love Chris Evans in this role.
Yes.
He nails this role. I absolutely love him as Captain America. And you said that he turned down the role like 3 times. Do you know who ended up convincing him to take it?
Was it Sebastian?
It was Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Mark Ruffalo. They called him and convinced him to take it. And he ended up, finally caving and saying, okay. But one of the things that the casting director said about Chris is that in his audition, as compared to all the other actors, there's this very subtle, but it's present, like a humbleness or, a genuineness. I don't remember what exact words she said, but it translates on screen.
Right.
There's a little bit of just this personality that you can't really teach actors to do that Chris just embodies as the character.
Right.
And I love that. He nails Captain America. And I also love Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter.
Yes.
I love their dynamic that they have. I think their chemistry on screen is really, really strong. And I also just like that Peggy, she's nice to him. Even as Skinny Steve, that she kind of, there's a curiosity that she has about him. And, she's telling him like, you've never talked to a woman, have you? And he's like, I think this is the longest conversation I've ever had with one. I think there's just a lot of great dynamic there. And I think both actors play the parts well.
Yeah, I agree. I also appreciate just like when he is Skinny Steve, like I just love like his motivation and determination, like to be in the army and to serve his country. And like, it's just, it's really cool to watch that. Like he's willing to do anything because it's kind of like, like what does he have to lose? And so, yeah, I just really appreciate that.
Yeah. One of the things that I love just about this movie as a whole is the message that it sends, or the message that it tells just about like character and integrity. Just the through line that, like Dr. Erskine says this. I think he might have been talking to the general. I know he says it to Steve the night before the procedure, but he says it's not about having the perfect soldier. It's about a good man. And that's what differentiates Steve from everybody else. And that's why the general can't stand Dr. Erskine, because he has these men that are solid guys that, are good soldiers.
Yeah.
They're physically fit. They're, all the list goes on and on. But
they're kind of turds.
Right, exactly. And you see that play out when he throws the general, I can't remember his name, Tommy Lee Jones plays him. But he throws a live grenade, or they think it's live, into one of their training sessions, and Steve jumps on it to protect everybody else.
Right.
But nobody else does. Everybody goes out behind cover and whatnot. And I don't know. There's just something really special about that. And Marvel, they really told that story well in this instance, that Steve was a noble guy, that Steve did value others as higher than himself, that he didn't like bullies. That was one of his lines. He's like, look, I don't care who it is. I'm not just trying to go kill Nazis. I just don't like bullies. And standing up for the little guys, it's really cool. And what I love about this movie is that it captures that, and it totally derails the scene in the Avengers when Tony and Cap are kind of going at each other. He's like, you're just a man in a suit of armor. Take that away. What are you? And, they're kind of going after each other and they're mad. And Tony says, everything special about you came out of a bottle. And it's like, no, you're absolutely wrong, Tony.
Right.
Go watch Captain America, the First Avenger. And you'll find out that it's not about the super soldier serum. It's about the heart of the man. And then you see that play out again in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when John Walker takes the super soldier serum, and it ends up making him super aggressive. And, he
just emphasizes everything about him already.
Yes, exactly. And Dr. Erskine says that in this movie, and that's why the Red Skull is a real bad guy, because he took it, and it makes good better and bad worse.
Right.
Or good great and bad worse. I don't remember how he says it, but that's essentially the gist of it, that it's going to pronounce these character traits that are already there.
Yeah.
And so John Walker is kind of the foil of Steve Rogers. John Walker was the perfect soldier by definition of the U.S. government. That's why they picked him to be Captain America, and all this stuff. And then he ends up, killing innocent people and doing like a public execution type thing of an innocent person, or, someone who hadn't been given a trial, and whatnot. And just, I think the fact remains that Steve Rogers was a good guy, and they really captured that well in this movie, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And kind of going off of that, another scene that really sticks out to me is like when he, what is the scene with the little boy that like is in the water? What happened? I can't remember,
So
but I remember liking that scene.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's right after the procedure happens, and then that Nazi Hydra double agent.
Oh, he like kidnaps him or something.
Well, he blows up the room, and then he's like, Cap is chasing him through the streets.
Yes.
And then he ends up kind of taking that kid hostage.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just really like that scene too. And just like that Cap kind of checks on the boy too after he after he gets in the water.
Yeah,
and the boy's like, don't worry, I can swim. Go.
Yeah. He throws him in the water. And
yeah.
That's a great small detail, because he does turn around.
Right.
And he could have kept going on and chasing, but he wanted to make sure that kid was okay.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's like, don't worry, I can swim.
Yeah.
It's a great line.
I love that.
Super cute. But yeah, it just really pronounces Captain America's Steve Rogers character.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this movie. It's a great movie. I don't think it gets its just due, if I'm being honest. I think there are a lot of people that slept on this movie, and I think right behind Iron Man is probably one of the best movies in Phase 1 outside of the Avengers.
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, it's just really solid. And, especially at the end of the movie, it makes me at least shed a tear pretty much every time I watch it. When Cap ends up putting the plane in the water.
Yes.
So that he can save everybody, and him and Peggy are talking on the radio. There aren't a lot of movies that can do that every time you watch it.
Right.
And I'm probably partial because I love comic books, I love Marvel, I love Captain America. So I'm maybe a little bit more invested than other people. But that being said, every time I watch it, I usually at least shed a tear just because of the sacrifice, the humility of him laying down his life to sacrifice thousands, millions of people, and being able to talk to his girlfriend, his best girl, while he's doing it. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And I have to say, one of the other good things or great parts about this movie is the dynamic with the Red Skull. Hugo Weaving plays the Red Skull really, really well.
He does a great job.
Hugo Weaving's just a great actor. I enjoy him quite a bit.
And wasn't this the only movie he actually played the Red Skull in?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so he, I don't know why, but just basically said that he would never come back and do it again. I don't know if he hated like the makeup, if it was a I think
I did read that was part of it. The makeup process was like really intense and extensive, but I don't know that was the whole entire thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Who knows with stuff like that. But, so yeah, ironically, or maybe not ironically, I don't know. But the Red Skull shows up again.
Yes.
He shows up much later in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. But he is not played by Hugo Weaving. He is played by, I can't remember his name now, but he's just a guy who does impressions.
Right.
He just tried to emulate Hugo Weaving's voice as the Red Skull. He nailed it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they digitally recreated him and just did CGI or if they actually had somebody on set. But either way, I would not have known that.
Oh, no, I wouldn't have either.
If I didn't look it up right after I saw the movie in theaters, because I couldn't hardly believe that Hugo Weaving actually came back.
Yeah.
Which he didn't. But yeah. So anyways, I think Hugo Weaving plays the Red Skull really, really well. You can't have a superhero without having a supervillain.
Right.
And there's just no redeeming qualities about this guy.
Yeah.
And that's what it should be.
Right.
There are some villains that are out there that they try to kind of humanize or try to
give them a devastating backstory or
right.
Yeah.
Or they try to kind of, get the audience to sympathize or maybe make the villain a little more gray as opposed to black and white, whatever. That can be interesting for storytelling because sometimes that is true to life.
Right.
However, there are men who are just evil for the sake of being evil.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're doing things that are wrong and they have no redeeming qualities. And that's exactly what the Red Skull is.
Right.
And Hugo plays that perfectly. I love watching him on screen because his dynamic with Chris Evans, Captain America, is just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You don't ever feel like the villain is kind of overshadowing the hero.
Yeah.
Because that does happen sometimes in these superhero movies where you get a villain who's just so perfect that they steal the scenes or the actor is playing them so perfectly, I should say. And it can be hard to, see the superhero actor maybe not play their part as well compared to them.
Mm-hmm.
But they both play off of each other really well, and I enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to hit on before we wrap up this week's episode?
I think I touched everything I wanted to.
Okay. Do you have a favorite scene in this movie?
Like I said, I think it'd be easier to think of one if I had watched it just the other day, but I haven't.
That's fair.
So, I mean, the one that sticks out to me right now is like the one I talked about with the little boy. I just think that's really like a sweet scene. But then I really like when at the beginning of the movie when Steve's kind of, like getting beat up by those guys and Bucky comes in and that's I think when we're first like really introduced to Bucky. Yeah. Yes. And just like that whole scene and dynamic between them. I don't know like if I watched the movie today, if I would still say those are my favorite, but sure. Those are scenes that I enjoy watching. Okay.
Yeah. It's hard for me to pick a favorite.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I like the scene when the Red Skull, I don't know if it's like the facility that he works in or what, like when it's burning down, and Cap and Bucky are trying to get out of it.
Yes.
And like that whole scene when they like, it's just like you're on the edge of your seat and they have to like, like jump over the like
explosions.
Abyss.
Yeah.
And, like Bucky, is it Bucky or no, it's Cap that almost doesn't make it, but then he like runs and jumps or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a cool scene too.
Yeah. Yeah, that is cool. It's hard for me to pick a favorite because I think there are so many good scenes in this one. If I had to pick one off the top of my head, I would probably say the scene where it's Dr. Erskine and Steve Rogers sitting in the barracks the night before his surgery. I just love...
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I just love what Dr. Erskine is saying to Steve and, just really reinforcing this idea that Steve is a good guy. Mm-hmm. And that's why he was chosen. He wasn't chosen for any reason other than that. And that he needs to remember that when he's given this power, the idea of when great power comes great responsibility, that you can't change.
Yeah.
And then you see that play out once, right after this procedure is done and the Hydra double agent blows up the facility and he shoots Dr. Erskine. Steve goes over to him and he doesn't say any word. He just reaches up and points at Steve's heart. Mm-hmm. That's a cool scene. Powerful scene.
Yeah.
For sure. And props to Stanley Tucci playing Dr. Erskine very well.
Yeah.
I had no idea until now. I don't know why I didn't know, but I never realized that was Stanley Tucci. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it looks literally exactly like him. It is him.
I actually read that the only, like, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons he took this role is because he wanted to practice his German accent.
Really?
Yeah.
I can totally see that. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But he does a great job. He does a great job. I love him in that role. And so anyways. Okay, cool. Well, I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you guys for joining us and listening. Next week, we are going to be talking about our first 007 movie. We are going to be covering Daniel Craig as James Bond in Skyfall. So be looking forward to that episode. If you haven't seen it before, go give it a watch. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere or not, but you can check it out. Great movie. One of the best 007 movies ever by a lot of people's standards. But you can look forward to that. Thank you guys for joining us. If you like what you heard, leave us a thumbs up on YouTube. Leave us a comment. It really does go a long way, especially the thumbs up. You wouldn't think that it does, but if you're listening, just ask that you consider giving us one because it helps us in the algorithm get promoted and reach new viewers. So we appreciate you guys, and we look forward to having you join us next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.